Still rolling?
Still rolling.
While I was writing Sidetracking, I went to a short film festival when every day we would see a dozen short films, and by the end of each day I realized that I'd forgotten most of them, and the only ones that I could remember were the ones that had really impactful endings. Those short films all had one thing in common. They were all about that one moment of change. So when I started writing Sidetracking, I started from the ending. And then I decided to reverse engineer the rest of the story and the characters and everything else. So I had plenty of ideas for scenes, for character, for journeys and all of that. So many ideas, in fact, that I was completely lost. And the first draft of the script was a mess, up until the moment where I found a theme. And when I talk about theme, I mean a clearly defined thematic question. The theme of the story is the same as a super objective for the actor. Stanislavski wrote about a pilot that would know how to fly across Russia without needing any maps. So he asked the pilot, "How do you do that?" And he said, "Oh, I just follow the river." The theme is the river that we follow. And every single scene answers the thematic question. If it doesn't answer it, it doesn't belong there. Or at least that was definitely the case on my script. Can two people who are really in love with one another stick together even if they need the different things? The film's answer to that seems to be yes, during the montage, because they're so in love. And then it becomes no, because love isn't enough. Then no, that wasn't love, but just a chance. Then no once again, because you can't love someone without knowing yourself first. And then towards the end it becomes yes, because love is also a choice. And again, yeah, it's a choice. And then the very ending says, depends. There's an element of chaos that you can't control. I can't read my handwriting. What I find particularly useful before deciding on the style for the film would be to, of course, knowing other films that would inspire it, but also understand what is the approach that was taken to make these films and that I want to follow. And there are two main, ends of the spectrum. One is extremely planned and detailed and controlled, and the other end is more spontaneous and improvised. Each have pros and cons. The spontaneous and improvised one will give more space to the actors for the performances to flourish, and the other one will probably look better and be easier to edit. In Sidetracking, we did a little bit of both, really. A couple of examples would be one, the bench scene, and one, the breakup scene. In the bench scene, we have our protagonist talking to the couple that picked him up, and the whole scene revolves around the idea that as the driver tells him his story, Jean sees his own life reflected in his words. So there is a connection between the two of them. The final point to the scene is the revelation that really they are not as similar as Jean would think, because the driver chose to be with his girlfriend, which is exactly what Jean didn't do. So the whole scene gets closer and closer to them, and then changes as Jean realizes the difference between the two of them. On the other end, if we take a scene like the breakup scene, the dialogue wasn't even written. We just knew what we wanted to do. We knew where the scene would start and when it would end. We knew their emotional arcs because we discussed them at length. And the only direction that was given to them during the first take was to just shout the subtext at each other. Tomas, the DOP, and I just followed the scene going around them. So we just improvised even the camera movement according to what the actors were doing. And we did this a few times, and the actors would never say the same things again. Every take would be completely different. And we knew that it would work, because at that point, even the language of the film was supposed to break down as they broke down as well. We decided to open with almost like a music video style, because what we needed there was to have the audience fall in love with the characters right away and with their romance and to believe in it. And also that way the next scene where they break up would be all the more devastating because we just saw their love. And in the next scene, when the music video montage ends, most definitely, the language breaks down, and when it recomposes and the film starts with the second act, with the conversation that I have with the drivers, then we go into a more classic kind of filmmaking. And by that I mean continuous scenes in space and time. And that continues up until the last point where you have these two characters just about to meet once again. And then the stakes get heightened, the language gets heightened and faster and faster and faster up until one gets on a train and the other gets down. And now we can relax again. Those were the main guidelines that we followed. The classic suggestion given to writers is write what you know. And I think this is the same for directors. I found that in the short films that I made before, that weren't about things that I've actually experienced or been through myself, they were kind of shit. And as soon as I started trying to talk about things that I've lived through, things that I understand on a different level, and people that I have actual empathy for, then I think that the story started working a lot better. And every single thing that I have put on screen is something that I really wanted to see represented. Sidetracking was conceived from memories and from personal experiences, and that made it feel essential to me in every single scene. Choosing a crew was a crucial part of the process, not simply because of their individual skills, but also for what they could personally bring to the project. So it became more about everybody contributing to that vision and almost creating, a hive mind, creating the film together, rather than just one person imposing that on everybody. Because of how the film was made, the most crucial role in the crew was the DP, Tomasz, and I knew that I could work well with him, mainly because we had already worked together. And before making this film, we were screening films together and we were discussing them, and then discussing the script. We created a visual style, like a visual grammar that would follow strictly. And then we also decided, on when we would break these rules and why we would do that. The pre-production, from the moment the script was finished to the moment we started shooting, was much less than a month. But all these other considerations were already taking place beforehand. The film was shot in a week, doing a road trip around Wales. And we shot there first because it's beautiful and natural, and we thought that the landscape was right for the story. Like, it would be the right place where to have this kind of emotional journeys going on. And secondly, because the producer is Welsh, so it was much cheaper and easier and more convenient to film there. All in all, we had almost 300 shots, most of them planned in a fairly detailed manner, a good part of them just found on the spot. And then editing took another couple of months. Shooting was difficult from like a logistical point of view. Editing was torture on a more intellectual, emotional way, because I had to kill my darlings. It is tempting to see it as a puzzle where you put things together and there's only one right way to do that. Making this film, which changed radically from every single rough cut that I went through, it became very, very clear that editing is nothing like a puzzle. It is much, much more like making a statue, like carving out raw materials and getting to the essential shape hidden in that, piece of marble or whatever. The theme of my film actually emerged during the edit. I have written it with something else in mind, and then I had to kind of take all of that and throw it out the window. For me, the theme was chance and coincidence in the lives of these two individuals going separate ways. The story started working much, much better as soon as I started re-editing the story as if it were about love and the two of them together. After you spend weeks and weeks and months looking at the same footage, you don't know what emotions that cut or that shot will elicit in somebody anymore because you're too used to them. So what you need is an external opinion, and once you incorporate that feedback, then little by little you get closer and closer to the final shape of the film, to the final cut of the film. At the end of the day, looking back at the process, what I'm realizing right now is that I can only create as much as I have been through, as much as I have felt, as much as I have the potential empathy for. So the stories that I can bring to the screen as a filmmaker are the stories that I feel are mine. And in this case, it was almost a literal one, which it doesn't have to be, but it brought me so much closer to understanding what are the films that I can make and that I want to make, because I can't make the films that somebody else will, but the same is true vice versa.